she woke up in this turbulence, and the guy in front of her is screaming, "Save me, save me, save me."
Oh, gosh. When I was a kid, I loved playing with the globe. I would spin it with a friend, and wherever our finger landed, that's where we had to go, at least in our minds. Well, our next guest does just that, but he actually flies to the destination, and sometimes it's with his entire family. Now, in today's episode, we're talking with Paul Holte, an airline pilot, travel enthusiast, and the creator of My Layover Life, a channel dedicated to spontaneous travel, aviation, and family adventures. Now, Paul's journey into aviation started early. He learned to fly at just 16 years old, sparking a lifelong love for the skies. And now, as a pilot, certified skydiver, and father, he's on a mission to visit all 7 continents with his family. In this conversation, we talk about starting a YouTube channel while working a full-time job, taking his family on last-second trips around the world, and how flying planes motivated him to become a better student. So buckle up, because this episode is packed with plenty of adventure, spontaneity, and lots of travel inspiration.
Well, welcome to the show. We have Paul Holte, a United pilot who flies 757s and also a YouTuber. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I am a little disappointed that I didn't get to do this podcast in Nice, but New Jersey's also good.
Jersey suburbs, that's where it's at, man.
Yeah.
So Paul, tell us, you are a pilot for 757s and
767s,
right?
It's the only airplane, or not the only airplane probably, but the only airplane that United has where you're qualified on like 2 different airplanes at the same time. So if you fly the 777, that's the only airplane you fly until you go to training on a new airplane. So, but the 757 and 767 cockpits are identical. So, so you can fly both at the same time.
How'd you end up choosing that plane?
So when I got hired I was originally hired by Continental on the 737. I flew that for 2.5 years, and I was ready for a change, and I didn't really know if I wanted to fly overseas like consistently. And the 757 and 767 fleet has a really wide variety. So like the Caribbean, all over the United States and Hawaii, but also Europe and South America, and so I bid to that airplane. And so you bid like, a bid comes out and they're taking 20 first officers. So you put your name in the hat, and if you're senior enough, you either get it or you don't get it. So I got that in 2009 and came over. And when I switched airplanes from the 737 to the 757 and 767, it's like I fell in love. I don't know if I fell in love with flying all over again, but I fell more in love with travel. Because now, instead of 12 hours in Omaha,
You didn't love Omaha?
Omaha is great. But 24 hours in Paris or Athens or Rome is suddenly way cooler. And it was almost like, I was seeing things like I'd go to Paris, and then we went to Normandy, and it's like all of a sudden, like things I learned in high school, it's like, oh, well, this totally makes sense now. Like, I get it why landing on Omaha Beach was a struggle.
Yeah, to read about it versus seeing it.
Why was it you were hesitant at first? Why did you go for the 737 initially?
It was the only thing offered when I started.
Yeah.
So you didn't really get to choose. Plus, you get, being really junior on the seniority list, you get a better schedule on the more junior airplane. So you have more control over your days off and your trips and all that kind of stuff. So, but as I was getting a little more senior, I was able to switch airplanes, and it's been awesome. I've now been on that airplane for over 15 years.
Wow.
And I have over 10,000 hours on the 757 and 767 combined. So it's been amazing. Like, I absolutely love it. And I will probably upgrade to something bigger soon. Not soon, but
you heard it here first.
Yeah. In the next 5 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Once they start phasing out the 757. I'd like to go to maybe the 777 based in San Francisco, because then I'll start doing some more like Asia and Australia and New Zealand flying. And in addition to
you have like a big, to think of some people's like travel bucket list. They're like, oh, one day I'm going to go to South Africa. You're literally like, I'm going to explore the continent of all of Asia over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's one benefit of being a pilot.
It is for sure.
Now, but being a pilot, you're traveling, ostensibly by yourself. I mean, do you have a crew?
We have the crew.
Is it lonely?
That's a good question. It can be lonely at times. Yeah, for sure. And maybe that's why I try to go out and explore. Because that's one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel, is because I saw a bunch of crew members in Rome or in Maui, literally just staying in the hotel room for 24 hours, like getting food delivered to the room, playing.
You could be doing this in
Xbox.
Omaha.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would you not go explore? I know, like, you've been to Rome 100 times, and like, there's for sure plenty of people that have been to Rome, like crew members that have been to Rome 100 times, but there's still like really cool stuff to see.
Yeah.
They got jaded.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so that's really why I started my YouTube channel, was because I wanted to show crew members, hey, if you're only here for 24 hours, take the train an hour, go to this little town, have lunch, take the train back. But that never really took off with my YouTube channel. So for 3 years, I was pumping out one video a week and had less than 1,000 subscribers. And because there's really good YouTubers like you two.
Wait a second. Go on.
Yeah. So, it was basically just a travel channel. So like, I was magically in Lisbon, and I was magically in Madrid, and I was magically in Rome, but I never talked about like what I did for a living, because at the time I didn't want it to be United related. So it was just me on a layover somewhere. And then once I started including behind the scenes, like airline stuff, that's kind of when
because I was going to say it honestly seemed like you were just an overnight success. I thought you've been doing it for like a year, maybe max, and you hit like 100,000, like bang.
Yeah.
But you're saying you were doing that for 3 years.
One video a week for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't every week, but often.
Yeah, about that. And it was your layover life.
It was my layover.
Yes.
That's all it was
Yes.
my layover life. And that's why I called it that.
Right, my layover life.
But yeah, I feel like that's what all overnight successes are. It's like you only see.
We see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't see the 4 years of struggling. There was a point where I almost quit. I recorded a video in Palos Verdes. And I was like, this is my last video. And I'm not.
Was this when we met?
No, this was before we met.
Okay.
And I like literally I finished recording this video, and I was like, this is dumb. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I post these videos and 30 people watch them, and like it's not worth the 20 hours of editing that I'm doing to do this. And I wrote a guy named Cody Warner. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a YouTuber and Instagram, like helps people develop their platforms and stuff. And we had chatted off and on Instagram, and I just wrote him, and I was like, hey man, I'm struggling, and I don't know what I'm doing, and feeling like I want to quit. And he's like, have you ever thought about like showing your videos to a room of 20 people or a room of 100 people or however many people have watched your video? I was like, no. He's like, it's a lot of people. Like,
yeah.
When you think about it that way. And like, obviously, numbers are like, if you're used to getting 100,000 views, like then you're used to that or whatever. But yeah, that was like enough motivation to be like, all right, I'm going to keep going. And I think it might have been my next video that kind of took off. And then here we are.
Yeah, it's a crazy world that we live and operate in, where you can have great success and you can have a creative outlet, but at the same time, it does feel like you're banging your head against the wall over and over again. Because people see us and like, oh, it's just so easy. You just take a picture, you just do this. And it's like, it's a full-time job. It's constantly like,
right.
Before we started recording, we were talking about like our creative process, and that's honestly a relatively new process.
Well, it has to adapt as life does, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to keep changing. And I think what I'm hearing from your story is that like you have to get up at bat so many times to hit the home run.
Yeah.
And it's not always that way. There are the outliers that sometimes just hit the home run out of the park. But really what you have to do is you have to figure out what your voice is. And oftentimes you don't know what it is because maybe you're looking at other people and you're emulating them. I know that's how we started.
Right.
And it just didn't click.
Yeah.
And it took someone to sit down with us to be like, you're the couple, lead
Multiple
with that.
people.
Multiple people. And we're like, that seems so narcissistic or like self-centered.
Right.
I don't want to talk about that. That seems silly. But also that seems vulnerable. So I think it's easy, or I should ask you, do you think it's easier to like show up in a different way to emulate someone at first? And then when you really find your voice is you, your voice is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's a little scary to put that out there sometimes because if someone doesn't like it, they don't like you versus they don't like this
Character.
version of you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find that voice? And it took years to craft.
It for sure did. And like the skill of like talking to the camera and all that stuff comes with time, obviously.
Yeah. And lots of cringe moments.
And lots of super cringy moments.
Been there.
Yeah. But I feel like when you are vulnerable on camera and you're just your real self, like that's what people connect with. Because they're not coming to watch a Netflix series because that's not what YouTube is, although it's trending that direction. But yeah, I feel like just being your authentic self is like, because then you're not having to put on a show every time you on camera. I mean, of course, like when I record an intro, like I'm like not screaming at the camera, but like
the energy's up.
Like Mr. Beast, like this is the best. Yeah. But you need like a little bit of a performance, at least to draw people into the beginning. But yeah, I feel like just being yourself is like what people want to see.
I think that's why Anthony Bourdain was so successful. I mean, if you watched him and you watch like the documentary and behind the scenes of how he operated, I mean, he was his true self. Like even there's one famous one of, I think it was in Sicily, where they went to take him octopus fishing, and they were dropping the octopus off the boat to make it look like he had caught them.
Oh wow!
And he was like, "This is fake." And he like in the voiceover, he was pissed, and in the voiceover afterwards, like the whole day was just ruined.
Yeah.
And then even in the footage, he's like eating this meal with this couple or like the restaurant. I don't know who it was, and his voiceover is like, "I would be told later that I was inebriated beyond like." I forget what it was. It was just so poetic, and it was just his true self, because he's like, "This, I don't want to be fake. I don't want to be ruined this." So it's we live in this world of like you got to dress it up, but also like you kind of got to be true to yourself.
Right. Yeah, and there's times where it's like, okay, this is the shot I want. This is what you go into a scene of your vacation. It's like, this is what I want to capture. And then, like for me, like my kids get in the way, or they're crabby because they didn't eat enough or whatever,
we know.
Yeah, we have time.
But you have to realize that like that's just part of filming and part of life, and like not every scene is gonna make it in the final cut, and that's okay. Like that's just how it goes.
So what was that big transition for you? Like how did you decide to shift gears?
In YouTube?
In YouTube, yeah.
I don't remember. I think it was, I had just upgraded to captain and I was on reserve. And so I didn't really have anything to film except me being on reserve. Mm-hmm. And this is, I don't know where I'm going tomorrow, but stick around to find out. Here's a video of me working out in my hotel room, and that's really what connected with people, is like, I'm sure the spontaneity of like, oh, he doesn't know if he's going to London or Los Angeles
just
tomorrow.
Wait and see
like,
type of thing.
Right. Yeah. But just introducing work into YouTube is what kind of captured a lot of people. And for me, that's boring. Like me walking down the jetway, briefing the flight attendants, talking on the PA, all that's just like, that's work. But that's what people don't get to see. They don't get to see the pilot making the PA from the cockpit, or they don't get to see briefing the flight attendants and all that kind of stuff. And so,
How do you get the audio, like the PA audio, into your video?
I have a special cable that plugs into my camera that plugs into the airplane headset.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like that like authentic touch.
Right.
It's not just a microphone on the camera. It is the.
It's like it's plugged into the airplane.
Yeah. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I just want to like compliment you on the inspiration of the big change that you made like mid-career. I mean, one, you were a what was it first?
First officer.
First officer, and then you decided to become a captain, which basically put you at the back of the line in seniority.
Yep.
You started a YouTube channel.
Yep.
So and you were set in your career.
Yeah.
I mean, you had kids at the time were how old?
When I upgraded to captain.
Yeah.
Or 12 or 10 and 7 basically.
Yeah, 10 is, and at that point, most people might say like, "Oh, you're set in your ways. Like nothing's going to change. You're just going to sail off into retirement."
Yeah.
You're like, "No, I'm putting pedal to the metal. Like
Yeah.
now it's time to get to work and do
Yeah.
some other creative stuff."
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a good career change. The main reason, to be honest, I upgraded to captain because we started sending our kids to a private school.
There you go.
And that was the
Motivation
easiest
enough.
way to just pay
Yeah.
for it without really doing much extra work. But it was a good time to upgrade, and it was a good spot in my career to like, I don't know. And I upgraded on the same airplane I fly. Some people upgrade, like they're a 787 first officer and they upgrade to captain on the 737, which is a dramatically different type of flying and different type of quality of life. And I was fortunate that I got to upgrade on the airplane I fly. They call it jumping the trash bag because we keep a trash bag in the middle of the cockpit just for like water bottles and papers and stuff.
Jumping the trash.
And
bag.
so like that's a very common term, is that like you jump from the right seat to the left seat and you're just jumping the trash bag, which kind of indicates that training's a little bit easier because like you've been on the airplane for a decade or whatever. Like you're just sitting in a different seat with different responsibilities, but the actual flying of the airplane is the same basically. So I was very fortunate to stay on the airplane that I love to fly. Like that's
kind of the dream.
it is the
Right?
dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I don't know, it's been awesome.
How do you find this intrinsic motivation to say like, I'm ready for my next life challenge? Like, going to life captain.
Life captain.
I'm going to call you life captain. Going to captain.
I'm a captain of life now.
Starting a YouTube channel. Now maybe in 5 years going to a different aircraft. Like, where do you find this fire and drive? Where does it come from?
I mean, part of it, like the upgrade stuff, just kind of comes naturally with your career. Although it is very easy to stay as a first officer because the more senior you get as a first officer, the better trips you have. And it's like, I want to go to Rome on Mondays, and you just do. And
Same.
so like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it just, I guess you see open doors and walk through them, and that's I don't know.
Yeah, but I feel like it's been a theme because even the story about Maui, how you're like, you saw people just sitting there.
Right. Yeah.
Sitting there physically without exploring, sitting
Yeah.
there, metaphorically in their career.
Right. And just being happy with their, I don't know. I guess
Was little Paul like that?
I was going to
motivated.
say, was this a childhood
Probably
thing?
because I was 14 when I started flying. And, like I feel like I've always been the one that wants to do what everybody's not doing. Like if there's 4 people jumping off a cliff and 1,000 people watching, I want to be one of the 4 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be the one that's doing what nobody else is doing. So like, I had my like punk haircut up until the last couple of years.
Okay.
Nobody had a haircut like that. Like, and that's a bad example of like what it means to be like different, I guess. But I don't know, just like having a YouTube channel. There's one other United pilot that has a pretty successful YouTube channel, and I don't know, I just always want to do what nobody's doing.
So you were flying at 14.
Yeah, I got my first ride when I was 13 in a small airplane, and at the time I was getting really bad grades in school, and so my dad said, for every A you get 1 hour of flying, and for every B you get a half hour flying. And so overnight I went from C's and D's to A's and B's and started flying lessons when I was 14, and I soloed right after my 16th birthday, which is how old you have to be to solo. And then I got my license on my 17th birthday, which is when you have to be 17 to get your license.
So most people get their driver's license at 17, and you were flying a plane at 17. Like, what?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It's been awesome.
What were some of your first flights?
I
Were
mean,
they just local, or I guess what was the first? What would be like a point to point or first trip that you
first, like they call them like solo cross countries.
Yeah.
For like training flights, you're going like 50 miles. So from like, the little airport I grew up flying at near Minneapolis to Rochester, which is 52 miles away or whatever. But some of the flights I remember the most, like after I got my license and now I could take passengers, was my dad and I flew up to my grandparents' house, and they lived on the Minnesota-Canada border. And so like navigating the Minneapolis airspace and then figuring out fuel and like.
How far was that?
It's like maybe a couple hundred miles. So not crazy.
In airport space, but like
Yeah.
for most people, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's more crazy that like I'm a 17-year-old kid flying my dad to his parents' house to go fishing or
It
whatever.
must have been so special to have that bonding connection with your dad over
Yeah,
this.
for sure. And my dad, he's always been super, both my parents, but my dad's always the one that's interested in like subscribing me to different flying magazines and, that kind of stuff. So yeah,
He was probably pumped that he found a way to motivate you as a dad.
Yeah,
He's
for sure.
like, oh, I figured out, I cracked the code. I know
Yeah.
what buttons to push. Here we go.
yeah, not a cheap way to motivate
Yeah.
somebody, but yeah. And I feel like that's, you have to have a motivation for everything you do. Like, and that's what motivated me to upgrade to captain. Like I needed to pay for private school.
Yeah.
But really after upgrading to captain, it really changed my outlook on like, oh, I can change the whole dynamic of this crew. Like the captain kind of sets the tone, because if the captain is a jerk, the flight attendants think all the pilots are jerks. And that sets a bad tone for the cockpit, and it sets a bad tone in the cabin, and then that expands to the passengers. And I realized that I had this ability to set the tone for the cabin and the cockpit, and you can immediately, even if you're having a horrible day, like you've got delays and de-icing and all these things that are not really ideal, but you can make it fun,
Yeah.
and you can change the tone of the cabin, and that extends to the passengers. And I don't know. So it's been rewarding to upgrade and be able to kind of change that sort of, not that all captains are jerks, but like,
Yeah.
but there are a couple.
Okay. Now that just takes some, I think that's just inspiring to have that insight. I mean, to see that, because I see this trend of little Paul not necessarily wanting to be different. I mean, you are different, but just taking a step back and looking at a situation this way some people might not, because you're looking at the plane and going, oh, I have some control over this, not just to go do my job and get paid, but to make it a better experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to guess that that's probably what United saw, and that's why they hired you, outside of the being able to fly a plane.
Right.
But yeah, that's I mean, that's a trait that a lot of people don't have. There's a lot of self-centered nature in today's world, and to be able to kind of step back and look at everything, because you don't have to do that.
Right. Yeah, and they say when they hire first officer, they hire you as a pilot, they say, we're not hiring a first officer, we're hiring a captain or a future captain, and that's what that's what they're looking for when they hire pilots. But to go beyond that, I've been getting comments lately saying, like, about my YouTube channel, like, hey, your videos are the reason I want to work for United. And there's this one guy, Aldo, who's awesome. We met, he was getting off an airplane I was about to take out, and he just real quick said, hey, I love your videos, whatever. Okay, awesome, thank you. Took a selfie, and he was on his way. And then we ended up flying together maybe a couple months later, and we were standing in the jetway about to board, and he said, I got hired by another airline that I was happy to be with, and it was fine. It was going to be a great spot, but not necessarily like what I wanted to do forever. He said, it was your videos that gave me the push to like try to get hired with United. And he's literally on the verge of tears in the jetway telling me the story about like, I guess, how I changed his life or whatever. But
Well, you did. I mean, that's a big change.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's cool to hear those kind of stories and know that someone's getting inspired
Yeah.
to either work for United or just become a pilot in general.
I think when you see someone deep in their passion, following their true north, that is inspiring. It's contagious. And so I feel like by creating these videos and following what you love, you're actually then giving a gift to the world. I was in a writing class once, and the author, Rolf Potts, said, it's not self-centered to write about your experience. It's actually like the opposite. You're doing people a favor to write about your story,
right?
Because you're helping others. This is what we have. We are storytellers innately. This is how we understand things as humans, through stories,
Right.
for thousands of years. So tell your story, because you don't know who it's gonna hit and
Right.
impact.
Yeah, and it does feel like when you start a YouTube channel, it feels very self-centered because like the camera's always on you. You're always getting the shot of you, like you're setting up the camera to walk in front of it or whatever. And it feels very self-centered. But once you get past that, you're right. Yeah, you're telling a story, and it's hopefully
It's human
impactful.
connection. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, I think you do a very good job of showing what a lot of boring life could be. It's still entertaining because I
Right.
can only imagine how many times you're in a hotel and you're going to bed going, I just want to be home, or this hotel room is horrible, whatever that we've all been in those yucky situations,
Right.
And you're able to showcase it in an entertaining and fun way.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily easy. As we just talked about before we started recording, like it's a struggle sometimes to come up with video ideas and like what's going to be entertaining, and maybe those are like the best times to record. It's like, well, I have no idea what I'm going to do today, and whatever, we'll see what happens.
I mean, I loved even following when you said you were going on a family vacation. I think it was around Christmas or a holiday, and you didn't know where you were going.
Yeah.
Like up until, I don't know, the 11th hour, you were like, we might go to Rome, we might go to Tahiti. And I'm like, what to you? That's so normal. And to anyone else, maybe other than us, we'd be like, what do you mean? So when you are thinking about trips like that with your family, because you do get wonderful travel perks,
Yeah.
why is
do
it
we
that
plan our
like,
trips?
yeah. And why is it that leading up to it, you don't know where you're going until the last minute?
Well, that's a good question. As a matter of fact, just recently someone wants to go on a trip with us to Hawaii in October. And we're like, that's 9 months away. That's about 8.5 months before we start planning vacations. But typically it's just based on seat availability on the airplane. So, like we were, it was when school was out last year, we had been planning a trip to Cape Town for like a month. We'd done all the research, watched all the videos. We even had restaurant reservations at a couple places. Like, this is what we're going to do. And then, I start talking about it with crew members and other people. And you hear these rumors of like, oh yeah, well, it's really hard to non-rev, which is short for like non-revenue travel, like standby travel. It's really hard to non-rev out of Cape Town because it's always weight restricted and the flights are very full. And then I heard this one lady tell me, she's like, yeah, we spent 4 days trying to leave Cape Town and finally bought tickets on a different airline to go to Doha and then to Washington Dulles. And then we non-revved from there to wherever they live. I was like, I don't know if this is a great idea. Like, if we have real tickets, it's a good idea maybe. But so then we just start looking at what's open. And when we were planning that trip, I was like, okay, Cape Town is not going to work. but we want to go somewhere, and we want to bring our kids to every continent before they graduate high school. So let's start looking.
Listen to that goal.
So let's start
casual
looking.
goal.
So let's start looking at what continents they haven't been to. And so at first I looked at Tahiti because I was like, oh, maybe we'll just do it like a week in Tahiti. And the flight had like 120 open seats. I was like, oh, well, it's just past Tahiti, Australia. I wonder how the flights to Australia look. And the flight to Sydney had, 150 open seats, and the flight to Brisbane had 130 open seats, and Polaris seats were open. I was like, we could get on this 12-hour flight in Polaris. And Erin, my wife, she's just excited. She's like, do you think we could get pajamas, like United pajamas? She was so excited to be on a flight that was offered. So, So
Did you guys get it?
Yeah, we got it both ways, which
With all
four of us. Yeah.
And you went to Australia?
We went to Brisbane and spent some time there. We've got some friends who are from there, so planning the trip was not terribly difficult. And really, going to Australia, it's like going to California.
How long was the lead time?
Maybe if you're in Polaris.
Yeah, maybe if you're in Yeah, what was the lead time from let's go to Australia to getting on the flight?
5 days.
5 days. Okay, that's more than I thought.
Yeah.
I was waiting for 24
that
hours.
morning. No. It was 5 days. Yeah.
But you're still basically on the bubble, like waiting. Like if someone booked those seats, you're out, right? Or do you get locked in somehow?
No. Yeah, you don't know until
You board.
Yeah, where you're gonna sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened to you where you've
Not
got on
gotten
the
on?
plane or got on the plane and then had to move or?
They're like, here's a player seat, and then 10 minutes later, like, go to the back.
I've never gotten a player seat and been unseated from it, but we've either not gotten on a flight before. That happened in Porto once. We ended up staying an extra day. And in Rome, we almost didn't get on once. We went to Vietnam a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. And the flight from San Francisco to Seoul, which is kind of where we had decided to connect through, was packed. Like I think it was booked right to capacity. So there was 0 seats available, but we were like number 3 on the standby list of 3, 4, 5, 6. So we needed, really 7 people to not show up because of where we were at.
Yeah.
And it worked out. There was a flight that misconnected and we ended up getting seats. But, my son, who was, I think, 9 at the time, he's in 33B. I'm in 55K. My wife's in 40L, and my daughter's in, 90J. We're all over the place. But they're good travelers, and that's, fortunately they've been a lot of places, and like we were kind of talking about before we started recording, they got 12 hours of movies and a little bit of sleep, and
they're used to it. They're ready to go.
They're ready to go. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Scotland is, we were saying before about how you can watch movies when the plane's up. And so she just looks out the window, just waiting for the plane to take off.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. We have a thing in our employee reservation system where you can look up like departing Newark today, what's available. And it just gives you, if you want to go international or domestic, it'll give you a list of these are
like spin the wheel.
Basically, yeah. And it gives you 15 airports that all have a lot of seats available. So it might be Cape Town, it might be Rome, it might be Athens, it might be Honolulu, could be Omaha.
Yeah.
And so we did a trip like that once too. That was one of our YouTube videos. I was in between trips, so Erin and the kids flew out from Minneapolis to Newark, and that morning we woke up and we just looked at what's available. And Rome had Polaris seats available, so we went to Rome 8 hours later.
Wow.
And getting home from that trip, it doesn't guarantee you're going to get back from those trips. But
wait, that trip you went from
Newark.
No. Sorry, the time frame of you guys knew you were going to take a vacation at that point?
A 4-day vacation.
But you knew ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to go somewhere.
Yep.
And then the day of.
Yeah. So I came in from a trip from Europe somewhere the day before. So Erin and the kids flew out that day. So we spent the night in Newark.
But that was all planned?
That was all planned.
And then it was
we knew the next morning we're going to wake up look at what's available, and go somewhere that night.
And you went to Rome.
So we went to Rome.
Omaha didn't make it.
We were there for 46 hours, and then flew home.
I have a couple questions, but one is popping up for me because I'm an inner romantic. Have you ever done anything like that, just you and Erin, where you've said like, babe, let's go to the airport. I'm taking you to dinner tonight in
or is she like,
Chicago or Miami or whatever. Or is she like,
I want to stay home.
No.
Or is that your next YouTube video?
There's your next YouTube
That's
video.
my next YouTube
Is there an
video.
anniversary coming up?
We just had our anniversary. So we went to Rome and the Amalfi Coast for our 20-year anniversary in October, which was super fun. And I really wanted to make a YouTube video out of that because it met, all of the exciting things that a YouTube video makes. Like,
Amalfi Coast.
We're flying standby.
Yeah.
We're going to a beautiful place. We're going to ride boats, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have all these adventures. We're going to rent a scooter and go down the Amalfi Coast, like all these fun adventures. And then, we flew to Amsterdam after that and met a friend of ours who lives there, and stuff like, like we were flying on standby on KLM, which we'd never done before. And we got to the gate, and the gate agent's like, the flight's oversold. So I was like, okay, well, we're here. So if something changes, let us know.
Yeah.
And then she walks over to us before they even started boarding, and she's really apologetic. She's like, I'm really sorry, but the flight's oversold. So I've got you in 15B, and you're in 22C. I was like, I don't know what oversold means at KLM.
Maybe something different.
But at United, it means you're not getting on.
Yeah.
So, but all that kind of stuff would have made a great YouTube video. But Erin didn't want me to record a YouTube video, which is 100% understandable.
Yeah.
And it was actually very nice to just go to the beach and not worry about what the next shot is, and actually enjoy our 20-year anniversary. So
yeah, I mean, there's times where we don't shoot. I mean, we've actually kind of basically suspended a lot of the YouTube type content. Some of it is out of just necessity. Some of it's out of focusing more on vertical content.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it takes away from the experience a lot.
Absolutely.
And so it's you kind of have to balance that. Because I mean, for a while it was we're going to this cool place, we got to shoot it. But then I feel like we just weren't seeing the payoff. And so it's but we were seeing the payoff more with the vertical, and it was easier to shoot. And it's easier to navigate as well with Scotland at the time, because one, we don't really want her in the content.
Sure.
We don't want her face in the content. And also it's very easy to all of a sudden become a producer parent, be I need you to do this. So we were we don't want to do that. But no, I get that. I mean, I get that. You have to put the camera down. Even people who aren't creating content, don't take pictures. Put it down. Take a picture for a memory, but put the phone down and just be present.
You were one of the first people who I met who was, popular on Instagram. He was like, I don't have Instagram on my phone. I was like, huh, what a concept.
Yeah.
Bold move.
Yeah. And I was very inspired by that. I'm still inspired by it. I haven't deleted Instagram from my phone, but
I'll show you afterwards. I turned my smartphone into a dumb phone.
oh,
There's an app. It's called Dumbify, I think.
okay.
And I'll show you the screen, but it
Yeah.
looks like I don't know if you've seen the trend of dumb phones now.
No.
Where basically it's there's so many different levels. Some are just you can text and call. Some are because people are well, I need Uber and I need Google Maps.
Right.
So it'll be that, but on a low res, old school green LCD screen. Or not even
really?
LCD. I don't know what that screen's called, but 1980s
Yeah.
screen. Well, with us, I'm I need the camera. I can't get rid of the iPhone just yet. So it's how can I limit my urge? And so when I open the phone, it's just this black screen with white text. That's it.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and there's no notification. So I'm still not perfect, but it stops it eliminates that urge when you open the phone and all of a sudden you see a red number and you click on it.
Yeah.
And an hour later you're why did I pick my phone up?
Right.
So it stops that. I also, I don't have Instagram on my phone. I can still get it through the website, but then I have an app that blocks the time. I can always turn that off, but it's
Sure.
it's putting barriers in place
Yeah.
to make it harder and harder to get access to it. I actually because I was going to upload a YouTube short, I had to download YouTube to upload the YouTube short.
Yeah.
And then I'll delete it again. So it's,
Yeah.
it's just a process because I mean, it's so addicting. And as much as now we have a 2.5-year-old, it's we're trying to protect her from this digital world, like we have to do the same for ourselves. And my new project is like plugging the phone in downstairs and going to bed.
Yeah.
I've done that like once since we've been home. I mean, we've been home for 2 weeks. But yeah, I'm trying to set up even like around our house. We were carrying our phone around. I was like, why? And I'm like, because we don't have clocks. So literally it's like, just buy a few clocks. Like that's one step.
Yeah.
Music, because our daughter loves music. Like get smart speakers so you can control it that way. Just little stuff here and there to like eliminate the need to carry the phone around. But it's a journey.
For sure. I feel like I was watching a podcast last night actually about, like the age between 9 and 15. That's like when like the cement is setting. Mm-hmm. Like if you're on your phone a lot when you're 10 or 11, 12, 13, 14, like that's going to be ingrained in you forever.
Yeah.
Like when you're 2 or 7, like the cement's still wet. Like you can try to write your name in it, but it's probably going to like smooth over. And that's the same thing with phones. Like you can kind of like adjust it from there. But between ages 9 and 15, like that's when it's like setting in. And if your kids are on your phone, 6 hours a day, that's going to be their life, Yeah.
So you're in that phase.
I know. My daughter just turned 14.
Does she have a phone?
Yeah. It is a battle for sure. I saw another thing the other day it talked about like how many months you live. So like if you live from 18 to 90, these are the months. And it's like little bubbles, and each bubble was a month. And it filled in like a third of them with like, this is sleeping. And then it filled in another bunch of bubbles. And this is just basic working out, taking care of yourself, washing your face, brushing your teeth, and all that stuff. And this is, work. And this is this. It's like, well, there's only a handful of months left. And then I said, if you're on your phone 4 hours a day, this is all that. And now it's like, oh, I only have 9 months. And that's if you live till you're 90 or whatever it is. I was like, wow, that's when you look at it like that, that's
one
so
thing
eye-opening.
I thought about a lot is, like getting stuck scrolling the phone for an hour. It's very easy for people to do that. It sounds, just sit on your couch and stare at your palm for an hour every single night. I mean, most people it's 2 hours or more. And so, that's how I look at it. And it is so frustrating when afterwards I put my phone down, I'm like I did it again. Yeah. It's like, because in my mind, I do the math, I add up, that's at least, 7 hours a week, and then, 28 hours every 4 weeks or a month. And it's like, that's a lot of work that you could be put towards something else. Right. You could be getting more sleep, like picking up a hobby. If you said, hey,
I could have worked out for an hour.
Yeah, it could have worked out for like all these different things that you could do. And, or just, I'm not saying to like, you need to be productive all the time, but I'm like, there's other ways you can connect.
Yeah.
Because I think about like us, it's like we could be watching a TV show together. Like that has more benefit like in your happiness than just scrolling the phone. So I want to ask can I ask some pilot questions?
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we got...
if you ask me what my route is, I'm leaving.
I'm not going to ask your route. I kind of want to ask like... so you had like the longest 757 flight, is that right?
Yeah, Stockholm to Newark.
And that's how long?
I don't know how many miles it is, but it's roughly like 9 hours. It like kind of pushes the limit of the airplane.
Okay. And then is that your longest flight that you've flown?
No, that's the longest 757 flight, and I believe that's like to this day that's the longest 757 flight in the world. But no, the longest flight that 767 does is like Athens to Newark or Newark to Honolulu or Maui. And those are 10 and a half, 11 hours.
So are you?
So those are the longest flights I've done.
You're getting breaks during that time, right?
Yeah, for sure. We get breaks even like going to London on a 6.5 hour flight, and the breaks an hour and 40 minutes or whatever. It's very short, but like.
What's the structure? Are there two captains? Is it one captain with?
So on the flights that I do, it's one captain and two first officers, and everyone goes through the same training. Like captains don't have different training. They have some leadership training that first officers don't do. But as far as like flying training goes, it's all the same. Like we're all qualified the same. So the structure is there's the captain, the first officer, and then the it's called the International Relief Officer, or IRO, or just relief pilot. And so you take off, literally 10 minutes after you take off, the relief pilot will go back and he'll be on the first break. And the breaks are just divided accordingly. So the breaks start 15 minutes after takeoff and they end. Everyone's supposed to be back in the cockpit before you start your descent. So 45 minutes before landing usually. So you lose an hour of the flight. So on let's say a 10-hour flight, you have 9 hours of break time. So the relief pilot goes back, has a 3-hour break, then he comes back. Generally, whoever's the pilot flying the flight will take the middle break because then you're more awake, like once you're getting ready to land and stuff. But it's kind of up to like how you're feeling and like, if like, hey, I'm wide awake, I'd rather take the last break. And then one of the other pilots will take the middle break, and then the last, the captain or first officer will take the last break. And then everybody comes back up for landing. And
now, do these planes have the break like separate rooms or the?
Yeah, so the 757, it's not an ideal setup. We sit in 4 Alpha for the crew rest, so it's just a seat in first class. It's a lie flat seat, like a Polaris seat. But oftentimes there's someone sitting in 4B, so like they're sleeping in the middle of the night, and you're just like hopping over them to get into your.
Yeah.
But and sometimes those passengers kind of grumble a little bit because usually we'll go back and talk to them and say, hey, just so you know, like this is our crew rest seat. We're going to be in and out throughout the evening.
So would you say a travel tip for someone booking a 757?
Don't book 4B.
Don't, yeah.
But maybe. But really, like if you're seated, if I'm in 3A and you're in 3B, I'm getting up to go to the bathroom anyway.
Yeah, right.
So like it's not like the pilot's in and out is really any different than another passenger being there unless they never go to the bathroom.
Right.
So I don't think it's really that. It sounds more intrusive than it probably actually is. And it's different because it's a different person every time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, who's this one?
This guy come from?
Right.
Yeah.
You guys wearing the same outfits.
And then on the 767, we have a different Polaris seat, and it's blocked off with a curtain. So that's a much nicer process because it's like
nice.
It's on the aisle, so there's no in between you and the aisle, and you have a curtain around you, so you can make it completely dark and get some solid rest.
It's a nice rest.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to resting, I mean, you are hopping from time zone to time zone. I mean, you said when you went on that Rome trip with your family, prior to that, you were in Europe a day before. Right. How are you handling jet lag? And what time zone do you live in? Or are you all over at all times?
I mean, you're just kind of on the verge of fatigue all the time, but it's just basically a constant series of naps. Like when I leave on a 3-day trip, like I leave in the morning in Minneapolis, I take a nap on the flight to Newark, and then I get to Newark and I take a nap in our crew lounge, and then I get on the plane and I take a nap on the plane, and then I get to Europe and I take a nap in the hotel, and then I have a solid sleep that night. And then it's another nap on the flight back to Newark, and then it's another nap on the flight back to Minneapolis, and really I feel like if you're only going to be there for 24 hours, it's hard to do this, but like in general, when you're traveling, like whatever time zone you're in, like you have to tell yourself that's what time it is. If you land and it's 8 a.m. in Europe, you can't say, well, it's 2 a.m. back home, so I'm exhausted. Okay, well, it's not 2 a.m. here, so like,
right.
And you're just gonna mess yourself up for your whole trip if you keep referring to like what time it is back home. So,
do you do anything with your diet or caffeine intake to kind of help with adjusting to jet lag?
It's just constant coffee.
Just constant coffee.
But no, not really. Just coffee when I need to be awake and napping when I don't.
So there was this book that was given to me, and it's like this book from like the 70s that was like how to adjust to jet lag using your diet.
Oh yeah.
And it had some interesting principles, but one was using fasting like the day before to kind of let your hormones adjust. Obviously you're moving way too much to be able to do this whole
Right.
plan. It had a whole like few day lead up schedule, like 2 or 3 days, and there was some of it was like you would literally, and I can't remember why, but you would drink coffee and then try to go to bed.
And like a coffee nap.
Well, it wasn't that, because I know what a coffee nap is,
Okay.
which here's a little hack for and you probably know this hack. If you want to like pull an all-nighter, I remember learning this in college, or if you just need to stay up. Basically, there's like 2 sleep hormones. There's one that is pushing you to go to sleep, and then there's one that is pushing you to like stay asleep. And I'm going to mess up. I don't know the chemistry behind it. What you do is you like shoot a shot of espresso and then try to take a 20-minute nap.
Yeah.
And it does 2 things. Is one, when you lay down, the urge, like your body is like, oh, we're going to sleep. So it turns off that hormone just to tell you to go to sleep. And then the coffee suppresses like the sleepiness hormone in your body. So it attacks both of them. So then when you wake up after that 20-minute nap, you're just like wide awake.
Yeah.
And it just resets all your hormones. Have you done that?
Oh yeah. Coffee naps are great. My wife and I used to go to Russia every summer, and we'd go to this orphanage and hang out with the kids, and it was awesome. And every afternoon, like the kids were napping, and we would have like a 2-hour break or whatever. And coffee naps were huge because like you're in Russia and like you're exhausted from the travel and you're playing with kids all day and so we'd go get an espresso or whatever, and then immediately go take a 15-minute nap, and then back to the orphanage.
And how did you learn about it? Did you know that, or did you just figure it out?
I think someone on the trip was like a doctor or something, and they told us about it.
Yeah.
Where did this idea for this trip come from?
Our church used to go to this orphanage every year. So there was like a big group of us that would go. And so there's like 30 people on the trip, and then 15 interpreters that would meet us in Russia. And
wow.
It was cool. Actually, the person we met in Amsterdam on our way home from Italy was one of the orphan kids. So like he has left Russia, went to Georgia, and then lives in a refugee camp in the Netherlands. So like this kid, like we left, we last saw him in 2019, and like you don't know when you leave if you're ever going to see those kids again. So like, and like COVID and then the war and all that stuff. And so to be able to like reconnect with him, and now he like speaks English, which is wild because like you leave and like you can get along through an interpreter, but like it's very hard to communicate with someone who only speaks Russian. And
right.
And then my wife and I saw him, and he's like, "All right, well, you want to go get a coffee?" I was like, "You speak English? Like, what happened?" So yeah, it's.
Now, did you take that trip? How many trips have you taken to Russia?
Five.
And did you do that before kids as well? Or
No,
was
it was
that
when we had kids.
It was when you had kids.
Yeah. The first year I went, Erin, my wife, didn't go with me, but the next 4 she came with. So
Wow.
yeah, and it's awesome. She still, yesterday actually, was one of Igor, the one who lives in Amsterdam, his brother Vlad. It was his birthday yesterday, so we texted him, and
Oh,
yeah, it's cool.
it's beautiful.
I wish we could
yeah.
go back, but it's
Be tough right now.
stuff going on right now.
Yeah. Little airspace issues.
Yeah. So I know you live your layover life, right? Like,
Yeah.
what does your ideal layover look like?
Yeah.
Or do you have any habits that you have when you're on a layover? I should say.
Yeah, my ideal layover would be, I did a video this summer. It was kind of targeted towards nervous flyers. So it was like, behind the scenes work stuff, but talking about like what you can do as a nervous flyer to help calm your nerves or whatever. And it culminated with me jumping off a cliff in Grindelwald, Switzerland, kind of to show like, it's okay to like step beyond your boundaries of like being nervous. And that was the whole point of me like jumping off this cliff. Plus I like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So like, that's like my ideal layover. Like we had a good crew. We landed, it took like a 1-hour nap, got a rental car, drove 3 hours into the mountains, jumped off a cliff, had a great dinner, and then drove 3 hours back, and then, slept and then flew home the next day. Like to me, that's like an adventure, like a little journey outside of like whatever town you're in to do like something awesome. And then,
Well, Grindelwald is like a snow globe has come to
it's
life.
amazing.
yeah,
I mean,
know.
it is that. I think that's what they designed snow globes around.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's just this.
Sadly,
magic.
it was like kind of overcast that day. So
Yeah.
and there was like one point where we like saw the peak of the mountain. It's like, oh, it's way up
that's
there.
weird.
Like, because it was all
The Eiger, right? Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Eiger? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We were there, and there's a famous waterfall in the area. And
Yeah.
we went there hiking, but you need to go, I think, in the morning, then the sun hits it.
Sure.
And it was still pretty, but we saw it, and I was like, okay, it's this cool waterfall. And then
Right.
later came home and saw like videos of it with the sun hitting it.
Yeah.
And it's just different, just more vibrant. I'm like,
Lauterbrunnen,
oh,
right?
Sorry?
Lauterbrunnen.
Lauterbrunnen. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So we had a great, Grindelwald is one of our favorite spots. But,
Yeah, I love
I was
that
a little
place.
bummed when I saw it afterwards, like, oh, that's the famous waterfall.
Yeah. I was a little disappointed when I recorded that video because I had done research on the company I was using to like do the cliff jump or the canyon swing or whatever. And they had said, if you have a camera that you can strap to your wrist, like it was part of on their website. If you have a camera you can strap to your wrist, you can bring that on the thing. I've seen other YouTubers and stuff jump with their own cameras, and it didn't cross my mind that it would be an issue. And then I got there, and they could tell that I was like recording a YouTube video, and I had an Insta360 with a strap for my wrist. And he's like, "Yeah, you can't bring that with." I was like, "Oh, well, I thought like this was like it said on the website you
Yeah.
can do it." He goes, "Yeah, it just changed like a couple months ago, and we can't bring cameras anymore. And
No.
but you can buy our footage." It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that, but like
I
now
also want this.
Yeah.
I want my own. You know, like there was a point where like I stood on the edge of this thing where you jump off, and I stood there for a while because it's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and like that would have been great footage of like me just like contemplating
Yeah.
life.
Life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead they send like a high energy, 60-second reel, and it's
yeah.
like this doesn't really work for YouTube
Yeah.
that well.
And it would
like,
be mutually beneficial for you to
right,
have
yeah.
footage.
And I
of
wrote
them
them, and
too,
I said, I've got this YouTube channel. Can I just get the raw footage from your cameras? No, we don't do raw footage.
Thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
yeah.
Which
And
is
when the
why I'm
Swiss
not-
tell you no, it's a no.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm not mentioning the company right now.
Copy
I'm
that.
still not happy.
Copy
about
that. But if you are interested in going to Switzerland, Grindelwald is
Grindelwald
definitely.
is-
Yeah. We didn't do any
place.
jumps like that.
No.
If the other thing, have you ever done canyoning?
No,
You
like
know what that is?
like a Via Ferrata type thing, or
It's a little different. Basically, in Switzerland, you can do canyoning, and what they do is, and Interlaken's a good place to do it. They go up, they find the river, and then you just follow it down the mountain.
Okay.
Which means like
sliding down the rocks.
sliding
and
down the
stuff.
rocks, jumping
Right.
off cliffs. The craziest one is, and I can remember we were like, it's freezing cold. You're in a wetsuit, but it's still like it's glacier water. And the guy's like, in this next one, because you can't really see what you're doing because you don't see it until it's your turn.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're gonna jump to a slide, and we're all looking at each other like, what is this? And you,
What do you mean?
The slide that's made of rocks.
yeah, and yes, it's made of rocks too. And so you jumped like 5 feet onto like a cliff wall, and so you jump and turn and put your back, and then you slide down the cliff wall into the water. Yeah, I mean, it was. I still like can't wait to go back. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's been at least 20 years since I
Yeah.
did that. But yeah, that was one of the most like amazing experiences to do
Yeah.
in Switzerland. Is that?
I love those kind of adventures. And
Yeah.
what's funny is like like my wife sometimes gets worried that I'm doing stuff that's like it's too dangerous, like jumping off this canyon swing or whatever. And the way I kind of like rationalize it in my head is like, okay, well, 6 people did it this hour, and 40 people have done it this afternoon. Like, this is something that they do every single day. If it was that sketchy or that dangerous, like, it'd be shut down.
Yeah.
Like I went swimming with sharks in Hawaii once, and I was like, they go out every 3 hours and swim with sharks. And
Yeah.
like, it's fine.
They're professionals.
They're professionals.
Yeah.
I can mentally do all that stuff, but since having Scotland, I don't know if I would do the rope swing, like things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff where I'm like, I got a lot of time with her, and like
Right.
same thing. Like my mind, I'm not scared to do it.
Yeah.
It's more the like, yeah, but the
What
consequence,
if?
what if?
Yeah.
And it's like before when we before having her, I'll do everything, sky jump, or skydive, do all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we need you.
Yeah. Now it's like, now I'm going, I don't think I could.
Yeah.
And good thing you did it all then.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and maybe in the future, maybe
You'll probably take them one day.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. So
The guy that, like the tour guide for this canyon swing in Grindelwald, he said, when you jump, like even though you know it's safe, like you know you're going to swing,
it's still terrifying.
he's like, your body thinks you're about to die. Because it's like 50 meters of free fall.
We did one in
New
Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same, it's a swing, but you're right. You fall forever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your
I
stomach
wonder,
drops
like,
out.
I wonder how many times you would have to do it before it's like, it's fine. It's completely natural. Because you see, like, the guides do it.
Right.
And it's like, they're looking at the camera, and it's like, they're completely not scared at all. So I wonder, like, is it 2 times or is it 30 times?
I think it's more. My guess is like 10.
I can remember when we did it, I was nervous, but like not that like anxious. You were very anxious. But I remember the fall, and I was screaming like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm still falling. I've run out of air.
Another breath.
Out of air.
Yeah, you ran out of air. Yeah.
I used to skydive when I was in college. I flew skydivers for a while, and in one of the perks, they didn't pay you for flying skydivers, but you got, it was like free flight time. But one of the perks was that you got to skydive for free.
And you got your free flight time.
And free flight time,
yeah.
which is huge. Especially as a college age kid, like it's awesome. You're hanging out with like fun people on the weekend. And so I learned to skydive when I was in college. I got my A license, and I only made 39 jumps total, like enough to get my license. And then I was like, I like this, but it's not like something I want to do forever. And if you're not doing it for free, like it's not super cheap, especially as a college kid.
Yeah.
So for my 40th birthday, I was like, I'm going to go make another skydive, but I don't want to do a tandem because that's boring. I don't want somebody strapped to my back. So I wanted to do like an accelerated free fall course, because it's like, I skydived, that was 20 years ago. So I need to take a course.
Refresher,
I need a refresher. And so the instructors I was with, they knew I had skydived before. So it's like typically an accelerated free fall course is you take the course, and then your first jump, you're by yourself, but the 2 instructors are like hanging on to you the whole free fall. And they had kind of given me a little bit of grace and be like, okay, if we see that you're doing well, we'll just let go and you can go by yourself. Okay, great. So we jump. And I was kind of wondering, like, because I remember the first time I skydived or skydove, and it was, like scary, like I had tunnel vision. I barely remember anything. And then the more and more I jumped, I remember one day I was like leaving the airplane, and like I could see the airplane, which was the first time I ever like saw the airplane going away from me. And I was like, oh, and it was like that tunnel vision was just opening up. And I had wondered, like, when I go to skydive for my 40th jump on my 40th birthday, am I going to be like tunnel vision, or am I going to like know what's going on? And I'm sure the instructors, because I was like completely calm, excited, not like scared excited, but like legit excited. Ready. And the instructor, I remember him looking at me, and he had this look like, is this a joke? Like, are you like a legit skydiver, and then you just took this course to like fool us? And I got out into the, on the side of the airplane. Now you're in the slipstream of the wind and stuff, and just completely felt at home, which is kind of crazy to like standing on the side of a plane and letting go. And just being like, oh yeah, this is perfect. This,
Paul Holte at home in the sky.
But it was really fun to like just go back and do that again, and be able to, like, the instructors like let me go immediately, and I got 45 seconds of free fall, and like throwing chakas to the camera, and it was cool.
There's another example of you just like setting the bar so high for yourself. Like, let me challenge myself by free falling out of a plane, like Paul Holte.
I've heard, and I don't know if there's any science to this, but I've heard the analogy of like, basically it's like there's like a floodgate in people's brains that regulates like stress hormone. Like I said, this is just like a metaphor. And there's some brains that like have an open, it flows out. And it's like, these are the people that like when wartime comes, like they can handle it. And then there's the other people, it's like theirs is really tight. And like when stress comes, like they just get overwhelmed. But these are also the people who can like be an accountant and like can manage like office type stuff because they don't need the external stimulus to keep them elevated. And I don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard that or like resonate with that, but I see the same thing. Like I'm with you where it's like, if I was standing up there, like I'd be excited and I'd be alert, but I don't think I'd be overwhelmed.
Right.
Colette.
Those two people marry each other.
And the thing is, and one isn't better than the other because I know Colette and I complement each other because there's times in like daily life where Colette is just like got everything organized because she focuses on it. But then it's like external, like it's almost like internal and external life. And I'm generalizing a lot, but it's like externally at times, it's like, I always make the joke when we like walk out of an Airbnb, Colette's like, where are we going? And she'll like turn left. I'm like, no, we have to go right. Like it's almost like automatic every time. So it's, I see that it with a lot of people where it's like, if you kind of understand that with yourself, like fortunately your dad probably realized like you're not a great student because your brain is like, I'm bored.
Right.
But once you realize, hey, I get to go have fun. I just need to, I need to eat my vegetables and then I can go
Right.
have my dessert.
Yeah.
So I feel like seeing that, and you'll probably, we'll see it with our daughter at some point, what her balance is with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What excites you? I want to kind of maybe wrap up with a few travel questions.
Yeah.
Did you have one before?
No, go ahead.
Is there anything that excites you like about the future of travel?
I like personally, like to get our kids to every continent is going to be huge.
Where are you on that list, by the way?
4. So North America, obviously, and then Europe. I'm like looking at the map behind you.
Perfect. Show me.
Yeah. So North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. So Vietnam, we went to Brisbane last year, and then they've been kind of all over, not all over Europe, but a handful of places in Europe. So Antarctica is going to be like the huge one.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. If someone wanted to sponsor a YouTube video,
If anyone's listening.
but there's way better YouTubers than me. But yeah, we'll see. It'd be cool. I mean, I know there's some. You can fly to Antarctica too, which would be.
Can you fly to Antarctica? Is the question.
Maybe that should be United's next. We're flying to Greenland like next year
I
or this year.
know.
Maybe we should start flying
Launching
to
that
Antarctica.
route.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, I don't know. As far as like the future of travel in general, like Boom Supersonic just did their first supersonic test flight yesterday. Like they broke the speed of sound, which is the first time I think ever that a civilian airplane's broken the speed of sound over, because normally you have to be like over the water. That was the first time they'd ever done that over land for like a civilian flight.
Do you know where they did that?
In the Mojave Desert, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting. I do wonder like what that airplane will be doing, because like if it takes 3 hours to get to London, well now the pilots who are doing that can go to London and back in the same day. It's like, well, I don't really want to do London turns, I want to lay over. So I'll be curious to see like what the trips kind of look like from a crew member perspective for that airplane. If you could go from Los Angeles to Sydney in 7 hours, that would be amazing, but I don't think it has the fuel to do that. So yeah, that's probably the next like big thing in aviation,
Yeah.
As far as like transformative. Obviously the Concorde used to do that, but it's been a long time since that happened. So.
And what's the time frame of that actually being available? Do you know?
They're saying 2029.
Yeah.
United placed an order for 130 of them.
130
of those airplanes, yeah.
Are they going to? Because I just thought they were going to repeat the
Concorde.
Yeah. So the 130. Do you know where those routes might be?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's too loud to fly over the
United States.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't. And maybe the rules will change as far as like what's allowed for supersonic flight, but yeah, I mean, if you could go to New York to LA in 2 hours instead of 5.
Amazing.
I'm curious how loud it is. Like if you're down here and it flies over.
Yeah.
At what does it fly at a higher altitude?
I
would think
believe
so.
Yeah. I would guess it's up in the above 41,000 feet probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how loud it would be, but if you got 130 of them flying around, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
So that's exciting. I don't know.
Is there any like obvious piece of travel gear that you always carry with you?
Other than camera gear.
Other than
Other
camera
than
gear.
camera gear. Gosh, that's a good question. I carry Gorilla Tape with me, which is not. I don't use it very often, but I feel like like there's been a time where like the overhead bin didn't close, and like I helped the flight attendant like tape it shut, just like mid-flight. Like they don't have the tool to do that, and that's not. I don't necessarily recommend that people carry that with them, but
Very emergency situation.
But that's like,
yeah.
No, I don't know. That's probably the weirdest thing that I carry that people probably don't carry.
Yeah. Any tips for, I know you did a whole video on nervous travelers and how to help them, but turbulence is a huge fear factor for people flying. And I've heard that you don't have to be worried about turbulence.
Yeah.
Tell me, should I be worried
What would
about
you say
turbulence?
to the person in 33B who's crying hysterically?
Yeah. As long as your seatbelt is on, and really the most dangerous part is if you get into bad turbulence and the carts are in the aisle, because those carts weigh like 300 pounds or something crazy if they're fully loaded with sodas and stuff. Like you don't want those flying around. But if you're in your seat and your seatbelt's on and everyone's seated and you hit really bad turbulence, like you're going to survive. Like it's not, and the airplane's going to survive. The wings can bend 45 degrees. Like nothing, but if you're walking around, then that could be a problem. But no, I mean, airplanes can go through turbulence that you couldn't even imagine, and be just fine.
Yeah.
So it's mostly uncomfortable, and I totally get it. Like it's annoying.
Can you remember your most turbulent flight?
Well, so Erin came with me to Edinburgh one night for New Year's Eve, and she remembers that flight very vividly because she was seated in Polaris, and we hit some turbulence, and we landed. I didn't even remember hitting the turbulence because,
That's your job.
Were you flying or were you?
I was flying. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in the cockpit.
That's cool.
And Erin was in like 2B or whatever. And she woke up in this turbulence, and the guy in front of her is screaming, "Save me, save me, save me."
Oh, gosh.
So I think that like
It's a little traumatizing.
traumatized her a little bit as far as like turbulence goes. And it ended up, it was fine. Like literally like something that we think about it from a comfort perspective. Like this is annoying. My coffee's sloshing all over the place. But like from a safety perspective, as long as everyone's seated, like it's not really dangerous.
Do you see it coming? Because often they're like, everyone take their seat. How do you have awareness of it?
So we've got a couple different apps on our iPads that either predict turbulence or there's this one app, and it's really cool because it'll show like what other airplanes around you are getting.
So it's kind of like the Google Maps, like there's a cop ahead.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's exactly like that. And it'll show like, okay, well, this airplane 30 minutes ago was at your same altitude, same track, and they got moderate turbulence. And so you can predict it based on that, or you can also just ask over the radio. That's usually the most accurate. Like the air traffic controllers usually kind of know, hey, you're going to get moderate turbulence for the next 20 minutes, and then it'll dissipate and then it'll smooth out. So, yeah, we usually have a pretty good idea of where it's going to be.
Okay.
Interesting.
That's soothing to the soul.
Yeah.
So this was amazing.
Yeah.
So much
Thank you
fun.
for
So
talking
fun.
about life on the ground, life in the air, and
Yeah.
everything in between.
And our
This is
first in-person interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More to come.
Yes. Now tell everybody where they can find you.
All my social channels are at My Layover Life. So YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Although I don't currently have TikTok on my phone, so I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to upload videos to that. But yeah, but all social channels.
Awesome.
I'm on X, but I don't ever do anything on there.
Yeah. Ditto.
Same.
It's been
Yeah.
a while.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. These are great free ways to support this podcast. Also, please subscribe to this podcast on both Spotify and Apple. On both of those platforms, you can leave us up to a 5-star review, which would help us out greatly. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned in today's episode. That's the best way to support this show. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please put those in the comment sections in YouTube. And yes, we do read all the comments.